Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shields, dust, lacers, peasants, pastors, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And let's see, where are we going today? Oh yeah, we're going all over the Middle East because we're going to talk about ISIS. And this is another video and a little series I'm doing involving numbers. And there are various topics, but they have to do with numbers and what they can say, what they hide, and what they mean. And in this case, is a perfect example of numbers that put a face on something that's all over the media, and there's still a lot of mystery about the group ISIS. And the question came up recently. I did a video, I think, about a year ago about speculations about how many fighters ISIS had. And at the time, the CIA, of course, was talking about 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 or whatever when it first started. And that's how many defeated it. Iraqi army of 42,000 or something in Mosul. And the numbers were quoted quite low. But even back then, there were some who suggested that there was as many as 100,000 ISIS fighters. So here we are, well over a year into this conflict and this ISIS phenomenon. And it came up again because I came across this Patrick Coburn, an article recently, and I'll attach it below. He's an expert on ISIS and wrote a book on it. And he talks about the fact that they have at least 100,000 fighters, and some say 200,000 fighters. So I thought, you know, God, that's really getting high up there. I want to look into this again, see if they have any information on it. And sure enough, I came across a good article that I'll attach below. But it still talks about the fact that the actual number could be between 100 and 200,000. And one of those reasons is because they have 8 million people under their control right now. And so let's get, I'm going to use kind of the format that's used in the article because it brings up three good points right off the bat of how we should look at figuring out how many fighters ISIS has. What would be considered part of ISIS, what is the amount of territory they cover, and what is the estimated attrition, or how many casualties ISIS is suffering. And through using that methodology, which I think sounds pretty sound, the conclusion is that the high end of the numbers that are thrown around are the ones that would be likely. And that's why we're talking about between 100,000 and 200,000. They have 2,250,000 people under their control in Syria, and another 4 million under their control in Iraq. So we have something over 6 to 8 million people under ISIS control. And let's remember that they have set up this caliphate, the state, and it has to be maintained. The state has to be maintained. They've created a bureaucracy. They have to defend the ground that they've already taken, and they have to launch these offensives all over Iraq, both north and south, and all over Syria, north and south, and then excursions into new theaters of operation. And then one of the important points that fleshes out these numbers, and I think this is a reliable theory, and that's the fact that they're conscripting, they're drafting people from all over this region they control. So thinking about all these different levels and hierarchies that they've created. And in fact, this article mentions the fact that the 200,000 figure that they come up with includes multiple categories: support personnel, police and security, local militias, bodyguards, various paramilitary groups, draftees, and trainees. And that the actual number of foreign fighters includes regular forces, so-called death squads, and elite paramilitary groups. And that's an interesting structure they bring up when they talk about those three groups, because first of all, I'm not really sure what the difference would be between their regular forces, their elite paramilitary, and having separate death squads. It seems like they could all pretty much function as death squads from what we've seen. And then interesting that they have an elite paramilitary, which suggests, once again, that the possibility that we have foreign bad actors who are running things with ISIS increases if you have a core elite paramilitary who are directing things, controlling these regular forces, these conscripts in these death squads. Because let's remember, to control the snake, you only have to control the head. So interesting structure there. And a lot of these speculation about these numbers comes from multiple sources, and the numbers keep going up, and they're all over the map. As a Georgetown University professor of security studies that I've been citing, he talks about a CNN report. The U.S. intelligence put the number of fighters at 9,000 to 18,000, which of course is ridiculously low. And then in 2014, the CIA was talking about 20 or 30,000 fighters, and that seemed like a lot at the time. And one of my theories is the reason why we're not hearing the high numbers is, on the one hand, you'd think the CIA would want us to know that there was that many ISIS out there to bolster their claim that we're going to be there for decades. But on the other hand, they probably don't want anyone to know the true scope of what U.S. foreign policy is dealing with now. Because when you get up into these higher range, it is a daunting task to think about doing anything about it, really, with these ineffective forces in the region and only airstrikes. So to get back to it, then to up the ante a little more, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that there was 50,000 ISIS in Syria alone. So once again, that would bolster the idea that there could be between 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000, easily 100,000 ISIS in total between Syria and Iraq. Russian experts put the total at 70,000. In August of 2014, a Baghdad security expert suggested that there was 100,000, and it's a Kurdish official who put the number at 200,000. But the Georgetown University professor, who is cited below if you want to find out who he is and what he has to say, he is the one also that brought up the 200,000 figure. If you speculate and analyze ISIS by basically the entire parameter of ISIS supporters, including all the people they need for their infrastructure and their caliphate, running their caliphate. And so for the final part of that, so now we kind of know what parts of ISIS we need to count. And I've talked about that. We've talked about what is the amount of territory involved, and the fact that they're able to control that large amount of territory, that large a population. They really haven't suffered any losses per se and are still on the offense, and that's the other part of the quotient, as they're launching offenses all over in Iraq and Syria, and they are still winning in the battlefield. And even though they haven't claimed large swaths of territory lately, they're still holding on to most of what they have. It turns out the famed assault of Mosul that the Iraqis and U.S. let out of the bag a few weeks back or a month back, apparently that's going to be put off, so Mosul will remain in ISIS hands. And so let's get to attrition. So according to CENTCOM, U.S. CENTCOM, 6,000 ISIS have been killed in airstrikes alone between August and February. So in 6 months, so that's 1,000 a month. And then you factor in all the other ground deaths in Iraq and Syria, and we get rough tallies of those from the Syrian Observatory and other sources. And so then, as this article points out, you have to ask the question, does it seem has ISIS lost 25 to 30% of its force? It looks doubtful through these airstrikes. Or does it seem more likely that they've lost 10%? And it seems like they've lost more like 10%. So using the math and those kind of body counts and loss of percentage of loss of force, and still how effective ISIS is in the field. Of course, one would have to assume that the numbers are indeed upwards of 100, between 100 and 200,000. Seems fairly likely, and we also know that, of course, foreigners have been streaming in there constantly, and they're continuing to draft more and more people within their territory. And one of my theories is that we'll find more and more of these Al-Qaeda groups dissolve and absorb into ISIS. And it could very well be that down the road, Al-Qaeda will not really be functioning as we know it, even though it never really was. And ISIS is the new kid in town. So anyway, here you have it. Some more ruminations and speculations and analysis about how many fighters does ISIS have. And boy, if they have that many, we are going to be, well, when I say we, the United States and its partners, its coalition will be in Iraq and Syria for a very long time. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?